My name is Soleil. I'm 29 years old, and 3 months ago, at my parents' 40th wedding anniversary dinner in front of 62 family members and friends, my mother handed me a Tim Hortons gift card with $20 on it while my brother stood across the table holding an open envelope containing a check for $30,000 toward the down payment on his first house. My mother's voice was warm and carrying, the way it always is when she wants an audience. "We just wanted to give you something small, Soleil. You're so independent. You don't need much." Everyone smiled. A few people nodded. My aunt refilled her wine glass. They had no idea what was sitting in my coat pocket. A lottery ticket I'd bought at the Petro-Canada on the way over. A Lotto Max ticket I'd almost thrown away that morning because I was running late and didn't have time to check it. $41 million changes a lot of things, but not in the way people assume. Before I tell you what I did with it, let me take you back to that night. Because the gift card wasn't the beginning. It was just the moment I finally stopped pretending. I excused myself to the kitchen of my parents' house in Oakville. The catering staff my mother had hired were moving around me with trays of bruschetta, and I stood near the window with a glass of sparkling water and let the cold from the glass press into my palm. My grandmother was sitting at the small table near the back door, apart from everyone, the way she always ended up at these things. She's 81. She has a bad hip, and she moves slowly. And my mother's idea of accommodating that is to set her in a chair early and assume she's fine. "Grandma, man," I said quietly, crouching beside her. I called her that since I was 4. It was our thing. She looked at me and something behind her eyes settled. "You look tired," she said, which was her way of saying she'd seen what happened in the dining room. "I'm okay," I told her, but I reached for her hand out of habit, the way I always do, and I felt her fingers and I stopped. Her skin was dry in a way that didn't feel right. Her hands were cold, not the cold of someone sitting near a door, but the deeper cold that comes from the inside. She was pale in the way I'd learned to notice in 4 years of working as a paramedic, the kind of pale that isn't about lighting. I sat with her for a few minutes asking her questions, easy ones, what she'd had to eat, whether she'd had her water today, whether her ankles felt swollen. She answered all of them but slowly, and there was something off in her timing. She told me she'd been feeling dizzy since the afternoon. She said she hadn't wanted to bother anyone. My chest did something complicated. She hadn't wanted to bother anyone. At her own grandchild's family dinner, while 62 people were drinking Prosecco 20 feet away. "I'll be right back," I told her. "I just need to grab something." I went to my coat. I carry a bag on shift that has a blood pressure cuff, pulse ox, glucose kit, a few other things. Old habit. I'd left it in the car. But I had a fingertip pulse ox in my jacket pocket, the small one I keep for exactly the moments when I'm not on shift, but my gut tells me to check. Her oxygen saturation was 91. Her pulse was 58 and irregular. Her blood pressure, when I ran back to the car and got the cuff, was 89/54. This was not dinner fatigue. This was not age. I went back inside. I found my father near the bar talking to my brother's father-in-law. My brother's wife, Celeste, was beside them, laughing at something. They are a unit, the 3 of them, a closed loop of approval and inside jokes and shared references to cottages and golf tournaments I have never been part of. My father saw me coming, and I watched the very small, very practiced shift in his expression. The one that says "not now, Soleil." "Grandmamon's blood pressure is low and her oxygen is dropping," I said quietly. "I think she needs to go to the hospital." Celeste put her hand on my father's arm. "She's been saying she felt fine all week," she said. "She's probably just tired." "She's not tired. She needs to be seen tonight." My father looked at me the way he has always looked at me when I say something that complicates an evening. "You're not on shift," he said. "Try not to catastrophize." I called 911 from the back hallway. I stayed with Grandma Man until the paramedics arrived, 2 of them, one of whom I recognized from a call-out in Burlington 6 months ago. I told them what I'd found. They moved fast. I held her hand until the gurney wheels hit the front step. No one from the party came to the door. I drove to Oakville Trafalgar Memorial behind the ambulance. I sat in the waiting room for 4 hours. It turned out to be a cardiac arrhythmia. Previously undetected, combined with dehydration and a blood pressure medication that had been refilled at the wrong dosage 3 months ago. The cardiologist told me that if she'd gone home and gone to sleep that night, she likely would not have woken up. I drove home at 2 in the morning. I sat in my parking garage in my car for a long time. I checked my lottery ticket. I don't have a dramatic story about how I reacted. I stared at the screen on the lottery app for a very long time, and then I put my phone face down on the passenger seat and stared at the windshield. I had matched all 7 numbers on a Lotto Max draw. The jackpot that week was $41 million. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. A strange, clinical stillness came over me. The same one that comes during a bad call when everything slows down and your hands just do what they're trained to do without waiting for your brain to catch up. I sat in the quiet until my parking garage lights timed out and left me in the dark. Then I went upstairs and called the hospital to check on Grandma Mann. She was stable. She was sleeping. The nurse said she'd asked about me. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I went to see a woman named Harriet Lowe. Harriet was a private estate and trust lawyer my grandfather had used for 30 years before he died. She'd handled his will. She'd been present when my parents had quietly redirected the bulk of his estate into a family trust that Grandma Mann had signed without fully understanding what she was signing. In the weeks after the funeral, when she was still in shock and would have agreed to almost anything. I knew about that because Grandma Mann had mentioned it to me once, carefully, as though she wasn't sure it was something she was allowed to say out loud. Harriet had been watching our family from a professional distance for a long time. I sat across from her desk and I told her everything: the anniversary party, the gift card, the $30,000 check to my brother, the hospital. Grandma Mann's signature on a family trust document she hadn't understood. The fact that my parents had been listed as co-trustees of that trust with full discretionary authority over Grandma Mann's assets for the past 2 years, and that in that time her TFSA had been liquidated, her GIC had been cashed, and the total of somewhere around $260,000 in lifetime savings had moved through accounts my parents controlled. Harriet listened without interrupting. She had a way of going very still when she was processing something serious. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How much of this can you document?" "Some of it," I said, "not all." What she told me next was careful and precise. She said the trust itself might be challengeable on the grounds of undue influence, given that Grandma Mann had signed it 6 weeks after her husband's death, in a period where her cognitive and emotional state could be argued as impaired. She said the liquidation of the accounts was harder to untangle without access to the trust documents and bank records. She said the cleanest path was not to confront anyone yet. The cleanest path was to move slowly, build the paper trail, and let the Consent and Capacity Board do the heavy lifting on Grandma Mann's behalf. "Don't let them know you know," she said. "Not yet." "I know," I said. She looked at me steadily. Then she asked if I had the means to pursue this properly, because it was going to take time and it was going to take legal fees. I told her I'd won the lottery the night before. She put her pen down. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Good." Over the next 2 weeks, I moved carefully. I claimed my winnings through the OLG office in Toronto and structured the claim through a numbered corporation Harriet set up for me. My name was not on the public announcement. I took the lump sum, which after taxes came to approximately $28 million, and I put it somewhere no one in my family could see it. In that same 2 weeks, I visited Grandma Mann every day at the hospital and then at the rehab facility in Burlington where she went to recover. She was sharper than she'd been in months, now that her heart rhythm was regulated and her medication was corrected. She told me things, slowly and carefully, the way you tell someone things you've been holding for too long. She told me she hadn't understood what she was signing. She told me she'd asked my mother twice what the trust document meant, and my mother had said it was just to protect her, that it was just paperwork, that Harriet's original firm had reviewed it, which was not true. She told me she had tried to ask about her accounts once, about why her bank statements looked different, and my father had told her she didn't need to worry about that they were taking care of everything. She told me she hadn't wanted to cause trouble. I held her hand, and I didn't let myself cry until I was in the elevator going down. I also visited my parents, twice, for dinner, playing the role I had played my entire life, the quiet one. The daughter who worked odd hours and didn't come to enough family things and was doing fine on her own. My mother made pasta. My father talked about my brother's new house. Celeste had started renovating the kitchen, apparently, and the quartz countertops were going to be stunning. I ate my pasta and I said that sounded great, and I drove home and called Harriet. Harriet had been working. She'd filed a formal request to the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee to review Grandma Mann's situation. She'd obtained a capacity assessment through Grandmaman's own GP, who had known her for 15 years and was, in Harriet's words, deeply concerned about what she was hearing. The OPGT had opened a file. The trust was under informal scrutiny. Nothing was official yet. But the wheels were turning slowly and carefully the way legal wheels do. Then my brother called me. It was a Thursday evening. He was at my parents' house, and I could hear the background noise of a hockey game. He called to tell me that our parents wanted to do a family financial meeting. He said they wanted to talk about Grandmaman's assets and how the family could best support her ongoing care needs. He said it in the neutral, reasonable tone he always uses when he's been briefed in advance. He said they thought it would be good for all of us to get aligned. I said I'd be there. 3 days later, I sat at my parents' dining room table with my father at the head of it, my mother beside him, my brother and Celeste across from me, and a man I'd never met who was introduced as their financial advisor. He had a leather binder. He was very smooth. The conversation went where I expected it to go. They wanted to establish a new care management plan for Grandmaman, who they described as needing increasing support. They wanted to consolidate her remaining assets into a vehicle that would protect her from the costs of long-term care. They had a document. It was a power of attorney for property, sweeping and unconditional, naming my father as sole attorney. It needed Grandmaman's signature, they said. They were planning to bring it to her at the rehab facility that weekend. I looked at the document for a long time. Then I looked up. I have a concern, I said. My father's expression didn't move. My brother glanced at Celeste. I said I was worried about the timeline. I said Grandmaman had only recently been discharged from the cardiac unit and that her care team had flagged the importance of minimizing stress during her recovery. I said I thought we should let her cardiologist and her GP sign off before any new documents were introduced to her. My mother said they appreciated my concern, but that this was time-sensitive. She said the trust structure they had in place was complicated, and they needed to update it. I said, what happened to the GIC? Silence. My father said, what? The GIC that Grandmaman opened in 2019, the one for $68,000. It matured in April. I checked with her bank. There's no record of those funds in any of her accounts. They went somewhere. Can you tell me where? My father's expression shifted, not into guilt. Into calculation. That money was redirected for her care costs, he said. I said, she's been living independently in her own home until 6 weeks ago. What care costs? The financial advisor looked at his binder. My brother said my name in a warning tone. I opened my own folder. I had printed 3 things. The trust document Harriet had obtained, the OLG's publicly available notice of the review of fiduciary duty in elder financial cases, and a letter from Harriet's office on firm letterhead stating that she had been retained to represent Grandmaman's interests, and that any attempt to obtain new signatures or execute new financial documents without independent legal counsel present would be considered a violation of the ongoing review process. I slid the letter across the table. The financial advisor picked it up first. He read it. He closed his binder. I looked at my father. He had not moved. She's not signing anything, I said quietly. Not this weekend. Not without her own counsel in the room. My mother said, Soleil, you are being incredibly dramatic. We are your family. I know, I said. That's why I'm here. I drove to the rehab facility that Saturday before they did. Grandmaman and I sat in the sunroom in the afternoon light, and I told her what I knew and what Harriet was doing and what she didn't have to sign. She listened. She asked careful questions. She had always been sharper than people gave her credit for. She said she had felt for a long time that something wasn't right. But she had trusted them because they were family. Because she didn't want to believe it. Because it's very hard to believe that the people you love are doing something deliberate. I know, I said. I understand that. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, your grandfather always said you were the one who paid attention. I swallowed hard. On Sunday, my parents arrived at the facility at 2 in the afternoon. Grandmaman's own lawyer, a junior partner from Harriet's firm who specialized in elder law, was already sitting in the room when they walked in. The facility's patient advocate was also present, which the rehab director had agreed to after a conversation with Grandmaman herself. My parents left without a signature. The OPDT's formal review concluded 8 weeks later. The trust was found to have been executed under circumstances inconsistent with free and informed consent. It was set aside. The funds that had been moved, $214,000 that could be traced, were ordered returned to Grandmaman's estate. My parents were removed as trustees. A professional trustee was appointed by the court. My father did not face criminal charges because the line between elder financial abuse and aggressive estate planning is a blurry one in Ontario, and the Crown declined to proceed. Harriet was direct with me about that possibility, and I had been prepared for it. The civil outcome was enough. It was more than they had ever expected from me. There was a specific look I had never seen on my father's face before the day the court order was served. I had seen him angry. I had seen him dismissive. I had seen him dismissive. I had seen him charming and performative and calculating. I had not seen him small before. He looked small. It was not satisfying in the way I had imagined it might be. It was just true. My brother called me 3 days after the order. He said he'd had no idea what my parents had been doing. He said he'd thought it was legitimate estate planning. He said he hoped I understood that. I told him I hoped that was true. There was a pause. Then he said, "You changed, Soleil." I thought about that. Then I said, "I don't think I changed. I think you just stopped being able to predict me." He didn't have an answer for that. We haven't spoken since, not in any real way. I don't hold it against him with any heat. He made his choices and I made mine, and we are different people who happen to have grown up in the same house, which is not the same thing as family. 6 weeks after the court order, a card arrived at my apartment in Mississauga. My mother's handwriting on the kind of heavy cream stationery she orders from a shop in Burlington. It said they were struggling. It said my father's reputation had suffered. It said she wanted me to know that whatever I thought had happened, they had always only tried to do what was best for the family. It said that I had $41 million and they were her parents, and she hoped I could find it in my heart to remember what family meant. I read it twice. I put it on my kitchen counter and made coffee. I stood in the kitchen while the coffee brewed and waited for the familiar weight to settle back into my chest. The one I had carried since I was old enough to understand that I was the child they didn't worry about because they decided I didn't need anything. The weight that had made me give more, try harder, show up to every family event even when I drove home feeling like I'd been erased. It didn't come back. I shredded the card. Grandmaman is living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Oakville now, the kind with wide hallways and a concierge and a community room, where she started doing a watercolor class on Tuesday mornings. I bought the apartment. It's in her name. She has a part-time caregiver 3 days a week, someone she chose herself after interviewing 4 candidates with the focus and precision of someone who has decided she will not be managed again. She called me last week to tell me the instructor in her watercolor class had complimented her trees. I told her I always knew she had good hands. I take Sunday dinners with her now. We cook together in her kitchen, something simple usually, a soup, a roast, bread that she starts on Saturday and finishes in the morning. She told me stories about my grandfather that I had never heard before, the version of him that existed before he became a grandfather, the young man who drove a terrible secondhand car and wrote her letters during the 3 months they spent apart in the first year they were together. She shows me the letters sometimes. I didn't expect this. I had thought about winning and revenge and justice and what $41 million does to a life, but I had not thought about Sunday dinners or watercolor instructors, or sitting at a small kitchen table listening to stories about a man I only knew as old. This is the part that surprised me most. I still work. I took a leave after everything settled and I thought about whether I wanted to go back, and I do. I went back to my paramedic posting in Halton Region 3 months ago. My crew knows something changed in my life because I am calmer than I used to be, less tightly wounded, less braced for the next thing. I don't know how to explain to them that what changed is that I stopped waiting for my family to see me and started simply living as though their seeing me was not the point. On my first shift back, we responded to a call in Bronte, a woman in her mid-70s who had been sitting alone in her apartment for 2 days before a neighbor thought to knock. We got there fast. My partner and I worked well together, the way you do when you've run enough calls with someone that you don't need to explain everything. She was okay. She was going to be okay. In the elevator going down, my partner looked at me. "You good?" he said. "Yeah," I said. "I'm good." And I meant it. I want to say something directly to you because I think some of you will know exactly what the $20 Tim Hortons gift card felt like. Not because of the money, because of what it was designed to communicate. That you are fine on your own, that your needs are low. That independence, which is actually a word people use for children they have decided not to worry about, is a compliment rather than a quiet permission to be forgotten. I am not bitter. I want to be clear about that because I think people sometimes confuse clarity with bitterness, and they are not the same thing. What I am is clear. I see what happened, and I see what I did about it, and I see what my life looks like now. And those things line up in a way that my life did not line up before. My grandmother almost died in a kitchen while 62 people celebrated 30 feet away. She almost died because no one in that room was paying attention. I was paying attention. I have always been paying attention. For most of my life, I thought that was the unlucky part of who I am. Now I understand it differently. The lottery ticket was not the thing that changed my life. The thing that changed my life was that I finally stopped being afraid to use what I already had.